Okay, good morning, July 7th, 2022. Mowing some, I'm just going to call this feral grass, wild grass. It's all orchard grass, Timothy broom. There's a decent amount of red clover. I never seeded this. This is about a 5-acre piece that the people just want it mowed. So I get this grass absolutely free. I have never put any money into this field whatsoever. So, and it's never, so it's never been fertilized. For years, they cut this and mowed it like a lawn. And, but I've been mowing it probably, I don't know, it's been 20 years, but it's probably been 15 years I've been mowing this probably. 1 year, half of this, about 3 acres of it, this section here, I put into hard squash and sweet corn. I did it all organically, which was pretty easy to do. I put a 2-row cultivator setup on the John Deere 60, and it was easy to do. Then, I only did that 1 year here, and itself, the seed bank came right back up like nothing. The first year, there were a few, annual broadleaves probably in here. And after that, it just came in and re-thickened up because the seed bank was here. I really didn't harm it that much by plowing it up and putting in the sweet corn and squash for 1 year. And, my question would be, how is this field really first cut yield here grass? It's doing as good as any fields I fertilize. Anything I put manure and compost on. So, I don't know, a couple things. Maybe this is just a really good site, fertility-wise, and I'm getting lucky. It gathered nutrients from the atmosphere for so many years, being mowed, and all the grass clippings being recycled right back into the ground. I don't know. But one thing about perennial grass fields, a lot of times, this is just a good self-sustaining ecosystem here that is producing a crop, and you can see, depending on the growing conditions, a good crop every year. I mean, that grass right there is chest high. That's about as high as about any of my other first cutting grass hay fields are right now. And it seems to be a self-sustaining ecosystem. Now, maybe it just has the right balance of soil microbiology that's helping assimilate nutrients. Now, I'm pretty sure if you went in here and you plowed this up and you put in a high-producing alfalfa mixture in here, it'd probably not be self-sustaining. It'd probably find these nutrients out pretty dang quick. But anybody else got fields like this? This is like, I'm sure everybody's got something like this. This is really how you make money doing hay. When I started in the early 90s doing hay, started my hay business, this is how I made my living. Free hay fields, grass fields that had been around since the old days for like 50 years, Now all those fields are gone. They're not even around anymore, really. So, they've long since got houses built on them. But this was really how you make money, was doing hay like this. This is a field that I planted a little bit over 20 years ago. I remember the day I planted it. So this is not a completely wild field, but I haven't done any maintenance on this field in over 10 years. I used to put manure on it. I haven't put any manure on this in over 10 years. I plowed this field up. It was just like goldenrod, like what you see over there. It was just all goldenrod and brush, and I disked it all up in one day with my big heavy Kraus disc and planted alfalfa in here. And the grasses over a 20-year period, the legumes, again, the ecology of the legumes are, like alfalfa cultivated variety type legumes, is they phase out after a while without heavy inputs. They don't stay. The grass seed bank came in, and you got Timothy and brome. There's orchard grass in here. The wet spots of the field have reed canary grass. And there's some milkweed in here. So there are some milkweed. There is, there's some broadleafs in here. Bed straw, which is completely palatable. That is in all hay fields. There's nothing, I don't advertise any of my hay weed free. So you can have other herbs in here with the grasses if you have a non-chemically treated hay field, but it doesn't hurt the yield. I think there's science to say that a diversity in this grass, basically it's mostly a grass monoculture, but a diversity of some of these other plants are beneficial to the overall grass community. Down here deep, there's a little bit of broadleaf plantain and narrowleaf plantain. That is a forage crop. It's not usually used in the US, but I know Green Cover Crop Seed sells it. It's used a lot in New Zealand and Australia as a forage. So this will come up pretty heavy in your second cutting, with the seed heads. So it's all pretty palatable. I don't advertise any of my hay as weed free anyways. And on these grass hay fields like this with no input, they're going to be more susceptible to the climate, the average, the annual climate. If you have good moisture, good spring, limited frost, they grow really good. They keep up in first cutting pretty much almost with fertilized fields. The big difference I see in like the yield is that these will have a pretty consistent yield based on climate, where if you have a chemically treated field, if you take them out of fertility treatment, chemical treatment, you'll have a pretty low production a lot of years following if you stop fertilizing it. Where these fields seem to get in kind of a natural balance, and I think your net return overall on these grass fields is higher than if you really had expensive inputs going into them. The yield might not be as good, but I think your net return is pretty good. We're here in first week of July. It's July 7th, and the orchard grass has already turned to straw, but Timothy and brome stay greener so later in the year. So that's why you want to have a diversity of grasses. And like I say, this has all been maintained naturally. This has been a two-cut system for over 20 years. And like I say, I'd call it a no-input hayfield because there's been no manure put on it for over 10 years. So, and it never had any granulated fertilizer inputs. I never had any herbicide on this, even when I plowed it down and put the alfalfa in. I did that all in one day. I took raw sod, disked the hell out of it, put the seed on all at one time. And you can see that this grass community really stays pretty persistent. There's a couple spots like over here where there's a couple patches of dogbane in here, and they're in the same spot every year. So without herbicide control, those are gonna pretty much stay there if you're not chemically treating them. You just have to live with that. They're in the same patches. Mowing seems to keep them contained for whatever reason, and the grasses are healthy enough to keep them you know, so that dog bean hasn't competed. But if there's a year where I come in and this field looks kind of more mature and has too many undesirable hay species in it, then it might go as a cattle feed versus a horse feed. I'm purely kind of looking at the economics on this when I'm criticizing expensive inputs. And grass hay seems to be one of those crops that you can maintain the field without any inputs. But you know, grass is one of those products that a small farmer can get into, and you can be a grass farmer. And even if you have, you know, like say bad yield, you can still maintain a grass field by your main cultural practice is mowing, keeping the weeds down, you know, from going to seed. Grass thrives from being mowed, where if I stopped mowing this field, it would be in no time, probably this dog bane would spread. So you see a pretty good patch of hemp dog bane. If I remember right, I think it was South Texas Cattle and Hay asked me if I ever harvest my own grass seed. Well, you can see the orchard grass is getting ripe, and it's starting to collect on the hood of my disc pine. And you can, that'll get really thick on there once this grass seed gets really ripe. And you could just grab that off by the bucket loads. So we'll come up here to a low spot in the field, which is pretty moist, and you'll see this canary grass is like 6 foot tall, the timothy's like 5 foot tall. And that just shows you that your main determinant of yield really is moisture. You know, like I say, climate. And you have risk protection with a perennial, no input, cool season grass hay field with your inputs, because you don't have any inputs. You're going to get a yield every year. But if you have a drought conditions and you came out here and applied fertilizer and you have really dry weather, it doesn't work on grasses. Grasses go dormant in droughty conditions. They just shut down. They're shallow rooted as opposed to like your legumes like alfalfa. And you have no risk protection there. So this is a low risk, you know, management system. And when you're in business, you always have to have risk protection, risk management for the bad years. That's why so many farmers have off-farm jobs. That's their backup. Okay, a little bit of grassland ecology. This is a mowed path to a small area here that used to be a food plot I planted for somebody years ago. It's really turned into be Timothy hay. Just a small area, but I'll get a few rolls of hay out of this, so I'll feed my cows for a few days. You can see where a path was always mowed, there's your grass. It's not mowed, there's your goldenrod and brush and all the other garbage coming up. And another reason why weeds are not always bad in a hay field is that, number one, a lot of what we call weeds or undesirables are useful forage. The livestock will eat them. And then secondly, everywhere where you see really tall weeds, the corresponding hay species that are with those weeds are growing really tall along with weeds. So there is some type of symbiosis, beneficial effect. Even like the video I did the other day of the Sudex mixed with the alfalfa, where the Sudex was really tall, you know, and you're looking at the Sudex at that point as a competitor to the alfalfa. The alfalfa was equally up there pushing along with it, okay? You can see right in that dog bane, the trefoil has vined up along the dog bane and grown 3 foot tall. Over here there's some trefoil ankle high, where it doesn't have that competition. Now maybe they're both benefiting from increased fertility in that spot. I don't know. And As far as I'm concerned, this is regenerative agriculture in its true form. Okay, a perennial crop. A lot of crops I just don't believe are meant to grow in what is considered this sustainable, regenerating, self-regenerating, I guess, system. So corn and soybeans. I mean, I don't see how you're going to do that without a lot of inputs that are going to become increasingly limited in the future and just lead to more of a dependence on the industrial, agricultural, chemical complex, which is just going to push more smaller farms, family farms, completely out of business. Because, and my response would be, if you want to get into a self-sustaining agricultural type ecological system, grow a different crop. Grow a crop that fits that. We don't need that much corn and soybeans, and in some instances, corn and soybeans, it's kind of like a crop looking for a customer. That's why there's always, erratic commodity price swings and subsidies that prop that whole system up. I mean, basically without the subsidies, there would probably be about half as much corn and soybeans being grown in the U.S. And the people growing it would probably be making more money. Because there are a lot of industries that work as hard as the farmers. And, at the end of the day, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears goes into this product. And so, this right here is a demonstration of a self-sustaining agricultural system that may be profitable for some people. And with this system of farming, so you're seeing weeds in here, there's some Canada thistle, there's a good amount of thistle, Canada thistle, a little bit of daisy flea dogbane, some hemp dogbane. Those weeds, just like the grasses, they're not consistent every year either. There's years where this is a real clean field, but you would have to not chemically treat this stuff. But there's years, you have to let this field compete amongst itself and let it establish that equilibrium, that each one of these species within this field have their own niche, and depending on the year, they're going to be more, conditions are going to be more advantageous to some species